One of the tools that you'll be using the most while painting is the color picker. The color picker features a hue ring that allows you to select a pure color: blue, yellow, red, magenta, green, and so on. In the center of the hue ring is a triangle with the value on the vertical axis and the saturation on the horizontal axis. Value controls the brightness of a color, and saturation controls the intensity of a color. Put these components together and we have hue, saturation, and value, also known as HSV. Click on the Color Picker Options menu and choose Display as HSV rather than RGB. Now we are able to control the hue, saturation, and value with color ramp sliders. Moving the sliders also affects the color picker, so if I move the hue slider, you can see the hue ring moving in response. I can also use the saturation slider to make the color more intense and vibrant, or more pastel and muted. The third slider controls the value, which can be used to make a color lighter or darker. You can preview the color you have selected in the color swatch at the bottom left of the color picker. In order to select a color, you can follow my three-step process. First, think about the hue of the color you want. If I were going to draw a daytime sky, then I'd choose a color that's somewhere between indigo and cyan. Step 2 is to decide how light or dark I want the sky to be. I'll choose a blue that's near the top of the triangle because I want it to be bright. For step 3, I'll decide how saturated to make the color. Is it going to be an overcast day and kind of muted? Or is it going to be a bright sunny day and very vibrant? Let's say it's going to be a bright sunny day. So I will choose a saturated blue. So to recap, I chose my hue first, my value second, and I chose my saturation third. Step number 2 and 3 are interchangeable, so it doesn't really matter which property you choose first. In fact, you can choose both value and saturation at the same time. I'll fill my canvas with that blue color. Next, if I want to add a bright yellow sun in the sky, I'll select yellow for my hue. And then obviously we don't want a dark sun or a dull sun, so the color we choose needs to be bright and saturated. I'll choose a color for my sun, and then paint it in. While you're choosing colors, you may notice that your color swatch is divided in half. On the right side of the swatch is your previously selected color, and on the left side is the color you're currently selecting. You can easily make color comparisons by having these two colors next to each other. For example, I can choose a slightly different yellow color to add some character to my sun. That covers the basics of selecting color in Corel Painter. I will be going more in depth into color selection later in this course. Now let's discuss how to use undo and redo. Undo can remove brush strokes one at a time, and redo can bring them back. If I start drawing a series of lines with the detail airbrush, I can go to Edit, Undo Brushstroke, and each time I do this, one more brushstroke will be removed until I reach my undo limit. A faster way to undo is to press Ctrl Z on your keyboard. You can also redo with Ctrl Y. As I mentioned, there is a limit to how many undos you can use. If I draw a lot of lines and then try to undo them all, I'm going to eventually reach my limit. By default, this is set to 32. That's enough to go back quite a ways, but I can't go back so far that I remove them all because I made more than 32 brushstrokes. Another limitation is that undo and redo information is cleared once you close a document or the Corel Painter application. We are able to change the undo limit by going to Edit Preferences and then looking under Performance. In the middle of this panel, we can see undo levels is set to 32. You can set the maximum number of undo levels to 256, but it will impact performance. The reason why is because your computer has to remember each of those 256 brushstrokes, which can consume resources that could be used for other tasks. I recommend that you set your undo limit to around 9. It's nice to have a few undos, but you don't need so many that you're going to be spending all day undoing. You want to be doing, not undoing. Limiting your number of undos is going to force you to move forward rather than spending all day undoing, but it's also going to have the added benefit of making Corel Painter perform a little bit faster. After clicking OK, I'm only able to undo and redo the last 9 brushstrokes I made. Typically when I use undo, it's to replace brushstrokes that I wasn't happy with. I don't usually draw a large section of an image and then decide to undo it. Instead, I would find it more efficient to just erase, repaint, or correct the part of the image I wasn't happy with, rather than undo and start over. As I mentioned earlier, you can use the keyboard shortcut of Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-Y to undo and redo, but if you prefer, you can also use the Wacom tablet properties to set one of your express keys or your touch ring to execute the shortcuts. With Corel Painter 2021 selected, I'm going to go to Express Keys and then Ring Keys. I will set the left button to Keyboard Undo, and on the opposite side, I'll set that one to Keyboard Redo. If your device has a touch ring, you can also use that to undo and redo. The touch ring can be overly sensitive by default, which can make it difficult to undo and redo with accuracy. You will want to lower the sensitivity of the touch ring to make it usable. Now let's discuss erasing in Corel Painter. One way to erase brushstrokes from your canvas is to select the Eraser tool in the toolbox. The Eraser tool works similarly to a real-world eraser. Lighter pressure results in a thinner, softer erasing. Firmer pressure gradually removes everything. There are options in the properties bar to control the look of your eraser. For example, there are hard edge and soft edge erasers. Just like the brush tool, there are properties to change the brush size and the opacity of the eraser. So if I want an eraser that erases slowly, I can set the opacity lower. Now the eraser takes time to build up and erase completely. The pen included with your drawing tablet might also have an eraser on the back end. The Wacom Pro Pen does. Once I flip the pen over and move the eraser end near the tablet, the eraser tool is activated. Now I can erase using the eraser end, and then flip the pen back over to return to drawing. Just like the drawing end, the eraser end of the pen is pressure sensitive, so I can erase lightly with light pressure, or I can erase thoroughly with heavy pressure. I can also resize the eraser using my keyboard shortcut of holding Ctrl and Alt and dragging my pen. Unfortunately, when the pen is flipped over, it's hard to reach that keyboard shortcut if you programmed it to one of the pen buttons. So in my opinion, that's one of the major drawbacks of using the eraser end of the pen to erase. You can remedy this by pressing Ctrl-Alt on your keyboard or setting an express key to resize your brush. I don't use the eraser end on my pen for erasing that often, nor do I really erase that much because there are lots of other ways you can remove marks or fix mistakes, which we will discuss later in these lessons. One thing that is also cool about the eraser end of your pen is that in Corel Painter, you can use it to select something other than the eraser. For example, if I wanted to select a blender with the eraser end, let's say the oily blender, then I can use my eraser as a blender instead of an eraser. I can flip my pen over to the drawing end and select a brush to paint with, and then flip my pen back over to the eraser end to blend. I can have two brushes selected this way. If you want to erase in this mode, flip your pen back over to the drawing end, then press N on your keyboard to toggle to the eraser tool. When you're done erasing, press B to go back to painting with a brush. If you prefer, you can also set one of the buttons on your pen to activate the eraser tool. Let's take a look at how to do that in the Wacom tablet properties. First I'll select my device, then I'll select my Pro Pen. I'm going to choose Corel Painter for the application I want to use the shortcut in, and then under Pen Buttons, I can set one of the buttons to Tablet Erase. Now if I hold this button down on my pen, it activates the eraser tool. If I let go of the button, then I can draw again. We've pretty much covered erasing, but what if you want to clear the entire contents of the canvas? You can select all with Ctrl-A, and then press Backspace to clear the contents of a layer. I'll go to File, Open, and I will load the sampling template. Now let's take a look at how to sample colors. A simple way to keep your colors consistent throughout your artwork is by sampling colors that have already been applied to your canvas. To do that, you can select the dropper tool, and then click on a color on screen to activate it in the color picker. If I click on a color, and then select a brush like the Sargent brush, I'm able to paint with the sampled color. Rather than selecting the dropper tool, with the brush tool selected, you can activate the dropper tool at any time by holding down Alt on your keyboard. When you release Alt, you'll return to the brush tool. That's really the quickest and easiest way to sample color while you're painting. If you prefer, you can also activate the dropper tool using an express key or a button on your pen. By default, the sample size is 1 pixel, so occasionally the color you get may not be what you expect if you're sampling on a busy image. These pixels are very small and very close together, so it's difficult to pick the same color twice. It is possible to sample a large area to average the colors, but we will discuss how to do that a little bit later. You can watch the second half of this lesson along with the rest of this course by purchasing it from my website at aaronrutten.com.